Next one we are showing you is a cockatoo named Old Bill. He's a slender-billed cockatoo from Australia and a very excellent talker. He's said to be 85 years old, and I quite believe he's all that. And now we are going to hear Old Bill talk.
You all right? Yes, I'm quite well, thank you. Now let's have a little dance. Come along.
Jean's leopard coat is particularly suitable for sportswear and point-to-point meetings. Under it she has on a high-neck dress in a tulip design of red, green, blue, white and black.
For through, you're looking at Colonel Hughes, DSO OBE, showing helmet of the British Cavalry Regiment. You're looking at Oliver Oldfield, who cleans London statues.
I consider your helm dominated, your personality dominated by the zone of instincts. I imagine that you could find your way alone in the dark.
Yes, I can.
Sound and sight by the magic rays of light that bring television to you.
What a memory.
Well, enjoying that trip down memory lane with me are three men who made those programmes happen and who knew Studio A when it was filled with life and music. Tony Bridgwater, who was a senior engineer, Bernard Greenhead, an EMI engineer who actually installed the new equipment in Studio A, and Donald Munro, a producer. Well, Tony, first of all, those seem to be such exciting days. Were they as exciting as we imagined?
Oh, very exciting. It's a great adventure to be embarking on an entirely new television system, something far advanced compared with anything we've known before.
And how do you think those programmes compare with the programmes we put out on television today?
Well, they were very good programmes indeed that were done, very ambitious, and on the whole, I think I would have enjoyed them more than I enjoy the present-day programmes.
Bernard, you laughed then. Would you two agree with that? What do you think about that?
Definitely agree with that.
Yes.
With all due respect.
But of course there are two different systems, as I said there on that piece of film. There's the Baird system and the EMI system. Could you just give me a sort of brief idea of how different they were?
Well, the Baird system was a combination of film and mechanics. It essentially consisted of a film camera. I'm talking the main part of the Baird system. There were one or two subsidiary things, including one small live studio. But the main Studio B was equipped with a film camera, an ordinary film camera, on a mounting that was secured to the ground. It couldn't move. The camera could pan and tilt, but not move about the studio, because out of the camera came the film as soon as exposed into a developing tank, a processing tank, and all that was done at very high speed. And at the end of a minute, the film came out of the last tank and went straight into the film machine, the telecine machine, as we called it. That's the machine that converted film into television signals.
So it developed itself. It wasn't technically live then, really, was it?
Well, it took a minute. It took a minute, so it was. It has been described as nearly live.
Yes, almost
but
live.
it was a way round the difficulties of doing live, unless you had an electronic system, which was what was installed in Studio A. Yes. That was the new.
And Bernard, you actually did install that system in Studio A. You must have been under a lot of pressure, especially when they suddenly reduced the timetable to 9 days.
Yes, I think one of the biggest difficulties, of course, there wasn't sufficient time to test the equipment out under operational conditions. For example, the camera cable, which was somewhere about 2 inches in diameter and had contained, I should say, 20-odd different types of circuits. And this heavy cable being moved around the studio very often broke down. Well, if it broke down in a live production, it was necessary to pull the camera back into the one side of the studio and install a new cable. On one particular occasion, not only one camera broke down, but we had 3. So the producer finished up his program, which he'd scheduled or scripted for 4. He'd only got 1 camera to finish off, and that was a flexibility that all the program directors had to put up with.
So panic is still a feature of live television even then. But you had to teach everybody, of course, to use the equipment, didn't you? We have a little piece of archive film which we wanted you to see. You might be interested in this, because I think you might recognise the man doing the teaching in this piece of film.
The tube is then mounted above its own amplifier, which forms the base of the electron camera.
Right, that was Bernard himself, as you just said, demonstrating the camera in the studio to everybody. The cameras must have been quite difficult to work. Donald, you managed to produce some extraordinarily ambitious programmes using that quite limited system in those days. Ballet was your real forte, that's what you're famous for. Was it difficult?
Well, everything was so experimental. We naturally were ambitious because we were building something that had never happened before. We didn't realize that it became worldwide. But behind it, there was this feeling of excitement, tension to get the program out. Several programs which I was responsible for, incidentally, I wasn't a producer, I was productions manager.
You became a producer later.
That's
right.
Later on, after the war.
I know you're famous for a particular shot of Margot Fontaine through the strings of a harp. That was experimental too, was it?
Entirely. Because in the control gallery where the producer was, he only had 2 pictures in front of him. One was what was called the transmission picture, and the other was a preview. The preview camera happened to be on Margot. Dame Margot Fontaine. The transmission camera was Sidone Goossens playing the harp. And just off the cuff, I thought, let's superimpose this. And there we had Margot dancing through the strings of the harp.
I think you were all extraordinary. It must have been so difficult being a cameraman in those days, but the programmes are fantastic. In fact, we were just talking about Sidone Goossens playing that harp there. The player of that harp was Sidone, and we have a little piece of film now. She's 90, but more than 50 years ago, here she is.